Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to those of you who have been with the series, Teodora Talks Tech, for a while now. So this is series 3. In this one, I am talking about self-care toolbox, which I think is incredibly important given what everyone is going through right now. But I did do 2 other series as well here at the Made of Millions Facebook page and the YouTube channel as well, depending on where you're joining us from. So the first one tackled the question of digital wellness. Hi, Emma. So if you're watching us live, please say hello. And the second one was talking about positive psychology practices. And in that one, I talked about some of the practices that we can engage in that are research-backed and that have been looked at for a really long time and that have had really positive outcomes in terms of how we feel about ourselves and the world as well. So you can feel free to go back and look at those again. Hi, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. And for this one, we're talking about self-care practices. There wasn't too much forethought in terms of picking this topic because of this particular kind of period of time, but it turned out to be aligned really, really well. A lot of people are talking about what are the different types of self-care practices that they can engage in, what are the different types of practices that can not necessarily remove the anxiety and the fear that we're experiencing right now, because it's not really possible to do that, but what are some of the ways in which we can kind of help ourselves weather the storm a little bit better, improve our focus, our concentration, our ability to do whatever it is that we need to do on a daily basis for ourselves and for our families, and just what are the different ways in which we can kind of try and see the silver linings here and just kind of make the most of what is going on. So for episode 3, I thought that we would talk about self-compassion. I really don't think that any kind of self-care practice or any conversation around self-care is really complete without talking about self-compassion and what it is and how we can practice it on a more regular basis. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you have any comments or if you have any questions, if you want to share your experiences with practicing self-compassion, please feel free to do that. Again, either on YouTube or Facebook, depending on where you're joining us from. Self-compassion is not always an easy thing to do. Showing compassion to other people, oftentimes people find to be a lot easier. And what I found interesting as I was looking up self-compassion and looking at some of the information, some of the images that I wanted to share with you for this live broadcast, one of the websites at which I was looking at, I kept getting pictures of compasses pop up. And at first I was quite puzzled with that. Then I realized that literally the word compass is part of the word compassion. And then I realized on a more kind of symbolic, metaphorical level, this makes a lot of sense. And I think in times like these in particular, when we are so overwhelmed, some of us even flooded by feelings of anxiety and of worry, trepidation, concern, and so on. One way of thinking about self-compassion really is as a kind of compass, a kind of sort of inward look that can help us look out into the world in a much calmer, much more focused way. Oftentimes you'll hear the term that you can't really love anybody else or care for anybody else if you don't care for yourself first. And I think this has been shown to be true, not just in that kind of symbolic sense, but really through some kind of research-backed approaches as well to looking at compassion and what are some of the benefits of it. So I think one useful way of looking at it is as a kind of compass that can really guide us more successfully to navigate any of the issues that we may be facing right now. One important thing to I think to talk about is the self component in the self-compassion. And a lot of the times people kind of misconstrue what we mean by self-compassion and when we talk about self-compassion, what it is exactly that we mean. We don't necessarily mean self-focus in that very kind of egotistical, self-obsessed kind of way. We absolutely don't mean that. In fact, when we're talking about self-compassion, we are, of course, looking inward and we are introspecting, but it really isn't so much about being so focused on ourselves in that more kind of again, a vain, egotistical way in which we see a lot of ourselves being self-focused in this day and age, thanks to social media and other things. But it's really about amplifying positive emotional states, showing, again, as I said, showing that compassion not just to other people around us, which is often a lot easier to do, but showing a lot of that to ourselves as well. And so one of the ways in which practitioners and researchers who are very focused on self-compassion, one of the ways in which they like to explain it is to really ask the question, if you were speaking to somebody who you care about a lot, if it's a family member or a really close friend, somebody who you love and whose well-being you care about, what kind of advice or support would you give them if they were going through something really difficult, and if they were asking for your help and they were asking you to give them kind of a sense of direction or some help and advice on what they're going through. So whatever it is that you would share with them and whatever it is that you would gift them as a way of supporting them, think about self-compassion as turning all of those things around and giving them to yourself. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about self-compassion. We're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about kindness. We're talking about a really kind of encompassing concept. It encompasses a whole kind of wide range of different things. And again, I discovered this compass word in here again, but what it really means is noticing your suffering, being moved by it, wanting to help yourself, and then finally acknowledging and accepting that your experience is shared by all of humanity. And that's a very big component of self-compassion as well. And of course, all of these different things we use to define compassion when it's facing outward and when it's facing towards other people. So the first kind of element of compassion is being able to notice the suffering of others, that others are going through a very difficult time. The second component is not just simply witnessing it and noticing it and seeing it, but really being moved by it. And then even more than just being moved by it, in an emotional sense, it's really wanting to help other people. And then, of course, finally, it's taking that kind of more expansive, a more wide view and accepting the fact that this is an experience that is really shared by all of humanity. And so when we talk about compassion, some of the other terms that we tend to use together with it are things like care, empathy, kindness, gratitude, acceptance, and understanding. And of course, if you speak to psychologists, in particular research psychologists or psychologists who are kind of focused on finding out more about compassion, they'll be very specific in terms of how they define all of this different terminology. For the sake of what we're doing here today, I think it's enough to just understand that all of these different states are interlinked. They're related to each other. One, again, kind of all-encompassing term that I like to use for all of these different positive pro-social emotional states is care. It's really having that level of care for yourself. Some people like to call that kindness. Some people like to call that empathy. Some will call it sympathy. Some will call it compassion. But the bottom line is really that you're noticing what is going on inside of you, that you're introspecting, that you care about what is happening to you, and that then, of course, you're moved to do something about it and to help yourself. And there are a huge number of benefits to experiencing compassion. And again, this is research that has been done a little bit more recently. We've only recently kind of gotten really interested in compassion, maybe because of everything that has been going on in our world. But it has shown that when we feel compassion, we have a very kind of physiological reaction to that, or there's a very physical impact on us from being in that kind of state. So our heart rate slows down. We secrete what we call the bonding hormone. Sometimes it's also called the love hormone. It's called oxytocin. regions of the brain that are linked to empathy, caregiving, and feelings of pleasure light up as well. And this often results in us wanting to approach other people, wanting to care for other people as well. And so that is why that kind of the movement component of compassion is so important. So actually being moved to help somebody else. It's not just about feeling that emotion of kind of sympathy, but it's actually also wanting to do something about it, actually wanting to help somebody. And this is also where kindness kicks in. So there are huge elements to, huge beneficial elements to experiencing compassion, both for other people and for ourselves. And we also know that this is a deeply human trait. One that starts very, very early on. And a lot of the research that's been done on empathy has shown that babies as young as about kind of somewhere between 10 to 18 months old are capable of experiencing or showing a preference for kindness in others, and are able to experience empathy themselves. And some of the research has shown that we're able to kind of trace this later on in children's pro-social behavior, so that if we look at the levels of empathy that they were able to exhibit when they were about 18 months old, we can predict the levels of pro-social behavior that we're going to see from them later on. So this is absolutely something that is built into us. It's something that we are wired to do. Sometimes, of course, it does take a little bit of kind of introspection and a little bit of a raising of awareness in order to be able to really connect with that. And again, as I said, it's always a lot easier to show this to other people rather than show it to ourselves. And so that's why I thought this would be a really important topic to talk about as part of this series that's focused on kind of building up and creating a self-care toolbox. And a lot of this research that I just mentioned to you, and the actual guided exercise that we're going to do in about a minute, comes from the research of a psychologist who's considered to pretty much be a pioneer in this field, and definitely one of the global leaders in self-compassion research, and that is Dr. Kristin Neff. And she's based in Texas at the University of Austin in Texas. And this is the website that you can access in order to find the exercise that we're about to do together, but also just a lot of other information, lots of free resources on self-compassion definitions in terms of what self-compassion actually is. And like I said, lots of free resources that will help you practice this at home. So the website is self-compassion.org. And that is where you can find a lot of this information based on the research that Dr. Kristin Neff and her research team at the University of Austin in Texas have been conducting. And so the bulk of what I wanted to concentrate on with this live broadcast, which I've never done before in my other broadcasts, and you'll know this if you've been watching them for a while, is to actually do a guided practice or a guided exercise with you. So whether you're joining us live right now, or whether you're watching a recording after this, for the next I think about kind of 10 minutes or so, we're going to go through a self-compassion exercise that's called the SelfCompassion Break. And this was put together by Dr. Neff and her team through the extensive research that they've done. So the first thing I would encourage you to do, this is the way we usually start mindfulness practices, is really just to check in with your physical self, with your body, wherever it is that you're sitting right now, maybe standing, you may be laying down, but really to check in with your body and see how it's feeling, see what your kind of physical comfort levels are. And if you're not that comfortable, to kind of shift a little bit in your seat. And just to get into a slightly more comfortable position. And if you're comfortable to do this, if you're by yourself, wherever you are right now, I would ask you to close your eyes, only if you're comfortable with that, of course. If you're not comfortable with that, you can just kind of lower your gaze and look at something that is right in front of you. I would encourage you not to look at your phone or a tablet, or even at this screen if you have too many things going on there, and if there are kind of notifications popping up and a lot of visual cues. So try to look at something that's kind of pretty plain in front of you. Just hold it in your gaze very, very softly, and try to just focus on my voice as I guide you through this. To begin with, I would invite us all to take a really nice, slow, deep breath together. So breathe in. And then out. And in again. And out. Great. And as you are listening to my voice and you're following the prompts, just try and maintain that rhythm of breathing and that depth of breathing, and just really allow your lungs to expand as much as possible when you breathe in, and then contract as much as possible when you're breathing out. And what I would invite you to do first of all is to think of a situation in your life that you're going through that is difficult, so that is causing you some amount of stress. So call that situation to your mind and see if you can actually feel that level of stress and emotional discomfort in your body. Right? And I would encourage you to find something that is kind of a moderate to low amount of stress. If you do experience heightened levels of stress during this activity, I would encourage you to take the time to do some more self-care practices afterwards, to get in touch with a friend or a family member afterwards to kind of help you work through that and help you to ease back into a more calm state. And of course, if you need to contact a professional, absolutely. So call that situation to mind, that level of stress, emotional discomfort, just feel that in your body. And the first thing that I would ask you to say to yourself using your inner voice is, this is a moment of suffering. Now, suffering for some people is a loaded term. It's a very heavy term, too heavy a term perhaps. So some of the other things that you can say to yourself is simply, this is stress, or this is hard, or this is difficult, this hurts, whatever feels most kind of true and authentic to you. If you would like to just summarize the experience in one expression, you can also just say, ouch, if that feels more kind of authentic. Right? But this is our first step of being really mindful and really present for this moment that is stressful. Remember to keep your breathing very deep. Whenever we experience stress, even in a very kind of intentional way like we are now, our breathing often gets very shallow and it comes up to kind of our chest. You really want to breathe from your stomach, deep in your belly. So as we're doing this activity, just make sure you kind of check in with your breathing as well. The next thing that I invite you to do and to say to yourself using your inner voice is, suffering is a part of life. And again, if you're not comfortable using that particular word, you can say something like, that is common humanity, or other people experience this too, or other people feel this way too. A very powerful thing that you can say to yourself in this moment also is, I'm not alone, or we all struggle in our lives. That sense of shared humanity, again, is a really huge component of experiencing self-compassion. It's very important that we feel that we are a part of a much larger community, a human community that experiences this in the same way that we do as well. And now, if you're comfortable, I would invite you to take either one hand or both and put them either here in the middle of your chest, over your heart, on your stomach. You can kind of gently hold yourself, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Or you can just keep your hands where they are, and that's perfectly fine too. But to begin with, just feel that warmth in your hands and just gently touch that part of your body. And just find whatever pressure feels comfortable to you right now, whatever is kind of most soothing, most nourishing for you right now. Keep that breathing deep, expansive. And finally, using your inner voice, I invite you to say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. If you're not quite sure what you need to hear right now, you can ask yourself that. And you can ask yourself, what is it that I need to hear right now? What words would make it easiest for me to express kindness to myself? What do I really need to hear right now? So some of the suggestions that I want to offer you are, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I learn to accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? May I be patient? And once more, may I be kind to myself. And just bring your attention back again to that point between your one hand or both hands and that part of your body that you're touching. Notice that temperature. Again, notice the warmth, the soothing sensation. And we'll take one more breath together. Inhale. And exhale. Wonderful. And when you're ready, and you can take all the time you want, I'm going to put my hands down just so I can check the comments section in our chat box, but take all the time you need to move your hands from where they were. And if your eyes were closed, to slowly open your eyes. And again, just kind of check how your body feels. At this point, I always tell people to kind of check their shoulders and their neck in particular, especially because of the way we work with technology. We tend to hold a lot of stress, a lot of tension there. And hopefully this activity kind of helped loosen that up a little bit for you. But if you feel the need to, you can just kind of roll your shoulders a little bit. If you were doing this position, you can kind of squeeze yourself a little bit harder, let go, and just kind of rejoin this virtual space in which we're talking about self-compassion. So with that, we're actually going to wrap up this session. So I didn't want to spend too much time for this one talking about the kind of the science and the research behind self-compassion. The real idea with this one, and like I said, this was the first time that I did this during one of these episodes, is really to actually actively participate in self-compassion in this exercise. Like I said, we don't do this enough when we're in these times of really intense, stressful, fear-based, anger-based, worry-based situations. We tend to go into problem-solving mode very, very quickly, and we don't really take the time to check in with ourselves and to actually ask ourselves, what is it that I need? For people who are living alone during this period of time, I think this activity, this exercise is particularly helpful. One, because it asks that question of what do I actually need? So in case there isn't somebody there who can ask that, you can ask that yourself. The second component is that self-compassion, like I said at the beginning, is about ourselves to a certain extent, but then it really also is about expanding our attention and expanding our awareness, and just kind of registering and noticing, being aware of the fact that we are definitely not alone in experiencing this. And in moments such as the one that we're in right now, given everything that is going on with COVID, with physical distancing, uncertainties to do with work, to do with school, it's incredibly important to remember that regardless of how difficult this feels for us on an individual level, we're still not alone. And a lot of other people are experiencing very much the same thing. So with that, I think we'll wrap up episode 3 of Teodora Talks Tech, the third series on self-care toolbox and self-compassion. I invite you to join me next week. This is going to be on August 10th at 10 a.m., same time and same place, where I'm going to be talking to you about minding your thoughts. And I'll be pulling a lot of little kind of tips and tricks that cognitive behavioral therapy has given us, so that you can use them in order to better manage your thoughts. One of the biggest problems that we have as human beings are just kind of inherent, is first of all the fact that our mind tends to wander very frequently throughout the day, every minute. And the second thing is that it tends to usually wander in the negative direction. It usually tends to wander towards content that is troubling, that is worrying, thoughts that can be very distressing. And cognitive behavioral therapy has given us lots of different tips and lots of different ways in which we can address that issue. The fact that our mind often wanders and wanders to negative places. We call this our negativity bias. So if you're interested in that, that's what we're going to be talking about next week. If you have friends, family, colleagues who you think could benefit from this series, please do share the Made of Millions Facebook and YouTube channels with them and invite them to join us next week. And if you have any questions or any comments, you can feel free to get in touch with me. You can either follow me on social media or send me an email. If you would like to, you can leave a comment below these videos, and I'll be sure to come back and have a look at them later on. So thank you all so much. If you're just starting off your day, I hope this session on self-compassion was helpful, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.